Be in the dark and get lost.
I'm so used to the projector still, I think.
All right, hello everybody.
Hello.
Hello. Yes. Hi. So happy almost July 4th. We're not there quite yet. We're almost there. My name is Becca Folsom, so I'm the coordinator for these programs as well as the membership manager here at the museum. So welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. I have a couple of announcements before we get started with Randy's presentation. So if you're not familiar, we have flyable aircraft that we take up in the air, and you can go fly in. They're all taking a break this weekend, but the next weekend they'll all be up in the air offering rides. So if you're ever interested in flying our B-25, our Huey helicopter, or a C-47, I highly recommend checking out our website, and you can book tickets directly on our webpage. As a reminder, for those who are interested in visiting the museum, we will be closed to the public on Friday due to the holiday. And the next big event that we have on our calendar is our Wings Over Marquette Air Show, which is happening up in Marquette, Michigan. So we will be heading up to the UP. That will be happening on August 2nd and 3rd. We have a couple of our aircraft that are offering rides, but we'll have historic aircraft displays, aerial performances, and a lot of family-friendly fun up there. We'd love to see you. Tickets are now on sale at wingsovermarquette.com, so I highly recommend checking that out, especially if you have a cabin or if you have people up there already. We'd love to see you. We typically have programs like this on the first Wednesday evening of each month. You probably noticed that the flyer out there is for our September program, so we will not have a program in August. Barry's all good, but he is unable to make it next month, so we're just going to take the month off, and we will all meet again in September. So we do have those bookmarks. Don't get confused. I just got those printed, so we does have the August date on there, but we will not be meeting in August. The topics for all of our upcoming talks will be on the website soon. I believe the September's is going to be on there either tonight or tomorrow. I will be sending out some emails about the September talk that will be featuring Steve Rozek. I think I said his name wrong. But he's been here before. He's really cool, so he'll be speaking, and I can talk more about that at the end of the program. I'd like everybody to silence their phones if you haven't already, and let's welcome Randy Hotton. Come up here for the presentation.
Well, you're on your regular basis to tell these stories. How many here have heard of Operation Market Time? There's one right there. Okay. Okay, that's because you're in a BP squadron, so you don't know that stuff. Okay, how many Vietnam veterans do we have in here? Just a couple. Okay. The stories of what goes on over there were almost legendary, and we're going to tell a little story about Operation Market Time. I flew in Patrol Squadron 45 for 6 months from December 68 till June of 69. And our primary mission was looking for the bad guys, trying to run guns down to the south. That was our primary mission. A little background on resupply. Everybody's heard about the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It's kind of shown in red right here. Came down from North Vietnam, went through Laos. It wasn't really a trail. It was an interlocking series of footpaths and bike paths that ran through the canopy in the jungle. But there's another area that a lot of people don't know about, and that was the supplies that came in through Cambodia, a place called Sihanoukville. And more supplies came in through Sihanoukville than came down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The North Vietnamese had built warehouses all along here to keep the supplies for their troops that were in South Vietnam. And the supplies flowed into South Vietnam in the southern areas there from the ports over there in Cambodia. It took the North Vietnamese about 170 days to move the supplies from Haiphong down into the battlefield in South Vietnam. But if they could do it by sea, they could move the supplies down in 6 days. So moving the supplies by sea was a big priority for the North Vietnamese. And they recognized that the seaborne infiltration was the preferred route to get the supplies down there because you didn't have the lag in the transportation. And the market time activity for resupply is divided into 5 phases. There was the pre-market time. This is before the U.S. became involved in Vietnam, 62 to 65. The North Vietnamese moved their supplies with impunity. They just dock, put them in a fishing boat, run them ashore with no problem. But then when the U.S. went over there, they discovered these boats coming in the February 65 to the March 68 time frame, when they were pretty active in bringing the supplies in. And this is what started Operation Market Time. And then there was a third phase called the trawler pause. And that ran from March 68 to August 69. And that's the time that I was running patrols off the coast of Vietnam over there. And then there's a second trawler infiltration. When the port of Sihanoukville was closed, they had to redouble their efforts to move the boats in, and the tactics changed, and we started picking up those boats. I was gone by that time, but the Operation Market Time people did. Then there's a wrap-up from April of 72 to the ceasefire. Market Time operation went on for 8 years. They flew 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, sometimes up to 5 or 6 airplanes in the sky at the same time searching for these boats. It was a very, very intensive operation. And that's when I flew, this area right here. The first discovery of these trawlers coming in was when the Marines landed at Da Nang. Remember, they sent the Marines over there to protect the airbase, which was kind of sticking your toe in the water just a little bit, or the camel's nose under the tent, the starting of the troops going over there. And because of the Marines coming in there, the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong had to really build up their supplies to challenge the Marines. So they were under pressure, and they ran these trawlers into the coast, and they were intercepted, and they were all destroyed before they offloaded their supplies. And you can see right here this is the area and where the trawlers came in. They were discovered and destroyed before they could deliver their supplies. And they're just junky old rusty fishing trawlers. So, in March of 65, the Coast Guard set up the Operation Market Time. And what they did, they divided the coast into these stations, sector stations right here, that had responsibility for supplies in those areas. And each one of these stations had a destroyer escort that was out here wandering around the South China Sea looking for gun runners. And this was the start of what they called anti-penetration operations. Closer to the shore, they ran these little things, swift boats, that could maneuver in shallow water, move rapidly to try to intercept the boats. And then when you went out about 20 miles, they had these minesweepers that were coordinating with the destroyer escorts to look for the gun runners. And then far out, they had these World War II destroyer escorts. But the most essential ingredient, once they started doing it, was the VP aircraft, the patrol airplanes. And when they started out, they were using the old-time, almost World War II P-5 Mariner flying boats and the P-2 Neptune. And these were out there doing radar run-ins coordinated with the picket ships. There wasn't any coordination uniformly throughout the coverage area. Each airplane reported to a ship. And right there you see the flying boat and the P-2 Neptune. Now these airplanes were old, and they were slow. They were about 150 to 170 knots cruising airspeed for covering, so they couldn't cover a lot of ground. And they operated out of a variety of different bases. The P-5s came out of Cam Ranh Bay, the P-2s came out of Sailing Point and Saigon, and the coordination efforts between all of these airplanes from the different bases left a lot to be desired. So you see right here, Saigon, Cam Ranh Bay, and up here towards Da Nang, they had the bases that operated these, and they flew these patrol sectors to coordinate with the destroyer escorts. Right here is the P-3 Orion airplane. That's the one I flew when I was over there. And in 1965, the P-3 was brand new. It had only been in the fleet about 18 months. And there weren't very many of them available in the inventory, but they brought those over there. And the P-3 was twice as fast as the P-2s and the P-5s. We could cruise at 350 knots. If we pushed the power up, we could take it up to 400 knots. And 400 knots is about 460 miles an hour. The P-3 was faster than faster than any jet I've ever flown, down low. We had 20 hours of fuel. We could stay up longer than we had a bathroom that would hold the facilities. And to do that, we'd shut off one of our engines to save gas. The airplane had so much power, it would do the same speed on 3 engines as it did on 4 engines. That cut our fuel flow down by about 20%. We could still do 365 knots on 3 engines. And the way these patrols ran, we'd come on station, we'd pick up a boat there and a boat there and a boat there. So we weren't doing just a straight line down there. We were dashing back and forth between the contacts. So our dash speed over the water was often 300 to 350 knots to cover all the area as we flew through there. But what they found was a single P-3 could cover the entire area better than 2 P-5s and 2 P-2s because of that speed and the capabilities. So by 1966, the maritime commanders wanted an all P-3 surface radar surveillance for maritime. And the trouble was, there were only 3 squadrons of P-3s on the west coast to support the operation. So what they did, they started bringing fleet squadrons in from the east coast, and my squadron at Jacksonville was ordered to go over to Vietnam in November of 1968 to pick up one of the deployments. And you see right here, this is the total flight hours for maritime, and when the P-3s came in, they got the same coverage for about half the hours. And our mission was to search, locate, and identify. Once we found something was suspicious, we'd locate it, and we'd pass our contact information along to the maritime operators. Then they'd send boats to intercept it and board the suspect vessel if it was possible. So our patrols ran from 20 miles off the coast to 120 miles off the coast. It was a 100-mile wide barrier. And they made that 100 miles because these trawlers weren't very fast. And at 18 knots, it would take them 6 hours to transit that 100 miles. And we had an airplane coming by every 4 to 5 hours, so they would be detected. That was kind of the way that was set up. But we called these daisy chain operations. One airplane after another just kept going in a big circle. And they named all the sectors that we flew through after beers. And it wasn't because they were all luscious. Beer names are very easy to remember. And you'd say, oh, up there today they like that Perky beer. Oh, going down to Hanover or whatever, they like Budweiser. And so we had these call signs that we memorized very easily to keep track of our our contacts. Of course, you always had the extraneous conversations of, how much beer do you have? Do you have any spare beer? Anything on tap? Is it cold? And we thought maybe sometimes if the bad guys were listening to us, they might think we're talking in code about beer and we were confusing them. So, how did I end up in Patrol Squadron 45 as a pilot? I've been kind of an airplane nut my whole life. I built the models, I went to the airport, and I tried to join the Air Force in college through ROTC, but they told me the angle of my chin wasn't just exactly right, so I didn't match the profile of an Air Force pilot. I didn't get picked up for the Air Force. And I was up at Michigan State University and doing what you do at Michigan State University, going to parties, having a good time, playing football with my buddies, and just hanging around and having really no direction on what I was going to do. And then Mr. Johnson, coming up for election in the fall of '64, he kind of portrayed his candidate running against him, Mr. Goldwater, as a warmonger. So Mr. Johnson promised, I'm not about to send American boys 9,000 to 10,000 miles away from home to do what Asian boys ought to be doing for themselves. Well, I voted for Mr. Johnson because I didn't want to get sent 8,000 or 9,000 miles away to do something that they should be doing for themselves. But shortly after the election, the draft quotas started really going up, and I started going, ooh, I only got my 4 years up pretty soon. They might be coming to get me, so I should look at what I can do. And I saw that the Navy was increasing their pilot recruiting because of the buildup in Vietnam. And they were calling for fiscal 68 graduation, which would be input in 1966, of 3,500 pilots. That was the largest pilot training class they'd had since Korea. And that record still stands. There's no year that they trained more than 3,500 since 1968. And I was sitting in the student union up there, having my coffee and wondering if I should go to class or not. And I picked up the student newspaper, and right there an ad was a Navy recruiter will be on campus next Wednesday. It's one of those things. Why was I there having my coffee and picked up the paper? Because I normally didn't read the paper. I was just sitting there, and I found that ad that they were looking for pilots to be on campus. So I went to meet the recruiter, and I didn't think I had a snowball's chance in hell of being accepted by the Navy. There was nothing spectacular in my life. So he said, well, we can't just take anybody. You've got to take some tests to see if you're qualified. Uh-oh. Well, he took me up to a little room upstairs in the union, and I took the tests, and they were like a college entrance exam, and I had 2 years of engineering, so the math and the physics and stuff just kind of flowed off. And I went back down and he graded the test, and he said, well, congratulations, you're qualified to apply to be a Navy pilot. Who, me? Really? Suddenly my whole life had a new direction. I could be a Navy pilot. This was the fulfillment of a kid's dream. I couldn't believe they'd let me do that. So they sent me down to Grosse Ile for my physical. And I'm going through the physical, and we come to the eye test. And I tested 20/25 in my right eye on near vision. I was no longer qualified to be a pilot. Oh, darn. But the corpsman was standing there, and the recruiter came by and said, come here. We really need pilots. Test him again. Well, I knew which letter I missed, so I changed that letter and I passed. So we moved on. There we go. We're gonna October 27, 65, I was sworn in. And I've written this book, and we're going to talk. It's available in the gift shop. It's for $20. I'll be glad to autograph them if you want to buy one after the show here. And it's kind of a off-color title. But those are the first words spoken to me when I showed up in Pensacola. My recruiter said, oh, you're going to love Pensacola. The beaches, the white sand, the clear water, the girls in their bikinis. Make sure you take your golf clubs and your bathing suit. It's just a great place. So I'm thinking I'm going to a resort. And I walk in the front door of that building, and that's what the Marine said to me. And anybody ever see the movie Officer and a Gentleman? Okay. That was exactly what happened. This guy is screaming at me. You heard the joke about the steers and the queers? That came right out of the introduction I got from this Marine. And I think I was asked to DOR about 6 times in the first 6 hours there. The DOR is drop own request. You don't have to go through the training if you don't want to. And they are trying to wash you out. They don't want to spend any time or effort on somebody who's really not dedicated to doing it. So we got the screaming and the yelling. PT at 5 o'clock in the morning, running a couple miles, calisthenics. We're sitting there cooling off in the shade after doing that. Marching off the merits on the grinder, which was hot August days with sun beating down on you with that 15-pound rifle resting on your shoulder. And right over here was the cadet club. That was the only place we could have a beer. So all your buddies are sitting on the patio drinking the cold beer and telling you how good it was as you marched your demerits off out there in the grinder. But 32 of us graduated, went into flight training, and there's yours truly up there in the upper corner. After I finished the training at Pensacola, I moved out to Whiting Field, the home of Training Squadron 1, where they had the T-34 primary trainer, kind of a derivative of the Beechcraft Bonanza. And one of the things we had to do was we had to get this picture taken right here. This is the hometown newspaper PR photo. The parachute harness just drapes across my shoulders. There's nothing on the back of it. I'm standing in front of the picture of an airplane, and right here is a helmet. They had about 3 of these helmets, and they gave you a piece of masking tape, and you wrote your name on it just under here where it won't be seen in the photo, and that's how they knew who took the picture. My class of 26 went through there in about 10 minutes. And after I finished flying at Softley, I wanted to fly the P-3 Orion. I had picked up a book right after I got interested in going down to North Seal called Goodbye to Sun by Gordon Forbes. And he flew patrol airplanes out of the Philippines in World War II. And his novel really grabbed me about being on a crew in a patrol airplane. So my pipeline was going to be, I wanted to fly patrol airplanes. So that meant going up to Whiting Field and flying the T-28. Now the T-28 was an awesome airplane. 1,500 horsepower, as powerful as most World War II fighters, fast, climb, acrobatic. It was a real handful for a new student pilot, but I loved getting that airplane. And we did basics, we did acrobatics, radio instruments, formation, cross-country, night. In fact, I had kind of a flight at night. I was doing the round robin over southern Alabama and Florida. In the middle of the night, my engine quit. I was at 2,500 feet, and my engine just stopped making noise. And the propeller wasn't going around as fast as it used to. And they had chase pilots orbiting over all the thing, that if you got lost, you could, help, I'm lost, come find me. And I said, this is 802, my engine just quit. What should I do? He says, get out. I didn't want to bail out in the middle of the woods in the middle of the night. Then my engine started again. And I called the back and said, hey, it's running again. Do you want me to take it back to Whiting Field? And he said, no, finish the flight. Okay, well, he said, finish the flight. I finished the flight and got back, and nothing else happened, so we made it out of that one. But after I did that, we went here. Went back to Softley Field with the T-28, and all Navy pilots back in the late 60s had to land on an aircraft carrier type training. If you couldn't go through the aircraft carrier training, you couldn't get your wings. But this was really exciting. I mean, when you step up there and you're going to land your airplane on an aircraft carrier, you know you're doing something really, really cool. So what we did was, for a week, they had an aircraft carrier painted on the runway with a mirror light next to it, and I did 78 practice landings, and they said, okay, you're good enough, you can go to the aircraft carrier. You go by yourself. No instructor is crazy enough to get in an airplane with a guy who's never done it before and not touch the stick. So you go out there solo. And we were on a schedule, a very, very loose schedule. The jets had priority because they had to go out there, they had to have catapults, and they had to do it at a certain time. But if there was a gap in it, they'd send T-28s out to do their landings. So we're sitting there in the lounge, you know, playing bridge, AC-doocy, whatever. And they run in and go, Flight 58 Delta, man your airplanes, you're going. So we flew 180 degrees out there, found the aircraft carrier, and I started making landings. And after my first arrested landing, which was milder than I ever thought it would be. I thought it would be like running into a brick wall. It wasn't bad at all. Hey, this is a piece of cake. We can do that. Well, I took off again, and we took off without catapults. The instructions were, give it full power, and when you can't see the aircraft carrier under your nose anymore, pull the stick back as far as you can. Trust me, it'll fly. Don't look at the airspeed indicator. Well, I looked at the airspeed indicator. He was right. It was at 50. It shouldn't have been flying, but that big engine just leaped off ship. And one of the things we were told, if we crossed the center line of the ship on the upwind, that was an automatic failure. So I didn't want to cross that center line. So I undid my shoulder harness, and I looked over my shoulder to make sure I was still on the starboard side of the ship. And right at that time, the air boss said, 802 brake. I'm going to have to turn into the downwind. So I grabbed the stick and turned into the downwind, and I landed with my second landing with my shoulder harness undone. Have you ever walked into a glass door you didn't know it was there? Okay, that's what it felt like. I slammed my head into the glass shield. I had stars coming out of my eyes, and I'm sitting there looking over the left wing of the airplane, and there's ocean behind me with foam, and I'm kind of going, what the hell is, what is going on here? Then I see the launch officer run over to my side. He normally stood on the right side, but he ran over to the left side, and he's pointing at me, and he's grabbing his thumb and pulling it back, because I still had the power on the ship. And normally he did kind of a thing, run up your engines and make sure he just pointed to the bow and said, get the hell out of here. And that was over. So we got that one done. I did 8 landings, 2 touch and goes, 6 arrested landings. And that's a picture of me right there on 344 when I came back. I was on cloud 9 then. I can't believe that I joined this club doing that. Then it was off to Corpus Christi, where I flew the twin-engine S2 and got my multi-engine rating and got orders to VP-45, who was deploying to Southeast Asia in December. But I had a lot of training to go through before I went there. Now, back in the old days, pilots on patrol airplanes had to be navigators first. So we had to go to navigator school and learn how to look through this sextant out the top of the airplane for the sun and the stars to find out where you were. And this is one of the airplanes we trained in right there. And it really works. I made numerous crossings Atlantic and Pacific and was never really lost too much. Celestial nav standard is if you're within 25 miles, you're where you're supposed to be. GPS, 3/10 of a mile. Then I went down to Pax River, Maryland, right near Washington, D.C., and I got to fly this airplane right here. This was the newest airplane in the Navy fleet. I would get 50 hours flying it in all kinds of conditions, night instruments, cross-country, ocean patrols, and really became semi-comfortable in that airplane. But one more thing I had to do before I could go to my squadron is I had to go to survival school. That's survive, evade, resist, and escape. And this was kind of a POW training camp. They dropped us in the woods, and these guys ran out of the woods with funny uniforms and patches on, and they're shooting their guns in the air, and they told us they captured us, and then they took us to this building in the middle of nowhere in Maine, and We had to take all our clothes off and stand belly button to back, and they hosed us down with the coldest water they could find to delouse us, and then they put these uniforms on us, and every one of us had a number, a strap around your neck with a 5, 4, whatever. Mine was 5. I was the 5th most senior guy in the camp. And as they killed all the people above me, I had to become the commander of the camp. So it was a interesting experience. After about 3 days in the camp, the SEALs showed up, drove through the gate, and rescued us. But then the truck broke down, and all the bad guys were screaming down the road in their jeeps, shooting their guns at us, and the SEALs said, "We'll hold them off, we'll hold them off, take to the woods." We took to the woods, so that was an interesting time. But finally, I showed up in Jacksonville, Florida, October '68, and we were going to deploy to Southeast Asia in December. I had about 6 weeks in the squadron before we went overseas. And all this time, I'm moving around so much that my wife is now going back to her parents' home in Garden City, and she's going to college at Eastern Michigan. We saw each other about 4 weeks over 14 months. When you're committed to the military, you are gone. In fact, one of the things that happened was we got engaged when I was in college, and we were going to get married when she graduated in June of '68. But the second week in AOCS officer school, the guy said, "Don't plan on doing anything because your body belongs to the U.S. Navy. The only time you can have off, probably you can think about, is 2 weeks at Christmas this year while you're in training." 4 guys in my class got married over Christmas. I was one of them. And right here, this is my crew. You can see right here that this is the co-pilot. I flew with him a lot because this guy was the XO. He didn't fly all the missions with us. So a lot of times I was on the airplane, there was only 2 pilots, which was really unusual. Really racked up the flight time. This is the first TACO. We had a second TACO, and myself as navigator, and we had radio operators, flight engineers, second mechanics that made up the crew for the airplane. It was a 4-day trip over to the Philippines. We left Jacksonville on December 9th, spent the night in San Francisco, Barbers Point, Hawaii, Guam, and then into the Philippines. And the way they had us set up was they would fly 5 patrols a day. The blue ones were coming out of Utah, Thailand, the yellow ones out of Cam Ranh Bay in Vietnam, and so VP-45 was up here at Utah, and VP-9 was there at Cam Ranh Bay. So we shared the operational responsibility with another squadron. And what they had for the market time was they had what they call a position of intended movement. That's where you're going to be each hour. So you start out off the name, and about an hour later, you're supposed to be 150 miles down the track, 2 hours, 3 hours. So 7 hours was the normal patrol. But because of our mission, we could be an hour ahead or an hour behind and still be in our time frame. So we had a lot of flexibility in how we operated. And these patrols were run as normal ocean surveillance. Ship count. Find as many boats as you can, take pictures of them, make log entries. But the big ships, the SS Tokyo Maru was not a gun runner. Why we spent any time taking photos, rigging, logging and stuff was beyond me. But right here, we came out of Utah, Thailand about 7 o'clock at night, and we got on station about 10 o'clock at night, and you can see right here, this is our box that we can be in that first hour. Ahead of us is another airplane out of Cam Ranh Bay, and the other one's just gone off station back to Cam Ranh Bay. And as we moved down, our box went like that. The one in front of us, their box went like that. So we were always in trail, and you can see just about the time we're going off station, another one comes on station up there off the name. But this was during the pause in trawler infiltrations. There just wasn't any gun runners to find. Back to your pile at 7 in the morning, 12 hours later. So we ran, the mission that they're looking at is, we wanted the North Vietnamese to know that we were running these patrols. They wanted to be seen, they wanted everybody to know that we were out there looking for them, to divert them from coming down. And so we had to find and identify. Now right here, the shipping lanes from Singapore up to Japan and Hong Kong ran right along the coast of Vietnam. And there you'd have a lot of ship traffic, and the gun runners would try to get in there and shadow these big ships that you couldn't pick them up on the radar. So that was, we were really, really busy in that area right there. The North Vietnamese kind of knew our tactics, and they stayed outside the 120 miles because we wouldn't look at any ship outside of 120 miles. They knew that. And right there, I'm at my navigator station with my copy of Jane's Ships of the World, so I can look up the silhouettes of the ships and find out what they are. I spent about half my time in flight at the nav station instead of the cockpit. There we are flying by one of those ships. Now, since we stayed in the air so long, we had to have a cook on board. So every crew had a cook. Normally one of the crew members who liked to cook took over the responsibilities. And this guy, his name was Campbell. So the acronym or the nickname Soupy fit him perfectly, and he loved his duties as a cook. He'd come up to the cockpit and say, "What would you like, Mr. Hotton? Here's the menu. Eggs, toast, pancakes, French toast. Fill out the menu, and then he'd bring a meal back to you, just like a restaurant." It was kind of neat. Now, one of the limitations we had, we didn't have any of this modern stuff, low-level TV, infrared TV, to look for the guys. When we found the suspect ship at night, we had to drop these World War II paraflares. And when you dropped the paraflare, there was no secret that you were in the area anymore. If he was a bad guy, he knew that you had found him. So we had rules of engagement. We were not to approach any potentially hostile ship within 1,000 yards, which was kind of the limit of 20 millimeter being able to do any damage to you. So what we do is we fly by one side of the boat, drop the flare, then fly around to the other side of the boat and look through the boat with the flare still behind us. You couldn't tell anything. Yes, it's a boat, it's floating. I can't see anything on the ship. It's just a block there. They weren't effective against these small ships. And, like I said, they alerted the enemy that you were looking for them. Now, during this year and a half halter, the trawler break, they believed no trawlers got through because they weren't trying. But information says maybe some snuck through because of our thing, but there was no critical need for the enemy to use their boats to infiltrate the barrier, because the port of Sihanoukville was open in Cambodia. And the U.S. said Cambodia is a neutral country, and what goes on in a neutral country is none of our business. The Soviets were openly offloading supplies there, and Cambodia was providing logistics support for the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese in Vietnam. And we were under orders, if we saw a ship going into Cambodian waters, we were not to take any pictures, we were not to photograph it, we were not to take any log entries. It was a non-ship because it was going into waters in a neutral country. And it was kind of a goofy thing. The Russians knew that we knew that they were unloading there, but nobody did anything about it. Kind of a go-figure thing. That's what you're doing. And about a year later, maybe a year and a half later, Nixon bombed Cambodia to shut down the supplies inside Cambodia. And the only way he could withdraw from South Vietnam was to stop these supplies coming in from Cambodia. And of course, when he did that, we got into a bigger fight about the anti-war and it shouldn't be bombing a neutral country. Okay, until spring of '69, it was unknown to the mercantile forces. There was a dedicated elite infiltration group in North Vietnam. It was called the 125 Group. And they had modern ECM. The Russians gave them their latest electronic countermeasures. And the P-3 had a very, very distinctive radar. You could pick up the P-3 radar and say right away, that's a P-3 radar. So these gun runners were watching us all the time, where we flew and what we did. And these ships were fast. They were 20-knot ships, so they could make that penetration between our radar runs, and they knew we wouldn't look for them outside of 120 miles. Now, the CIA knew of these gun runner operations. They had intelligence on the 125 Group, and they had SR-71s flying over Hanoi and Haiphong every day, and they would see when these ships left port to make their run. And this information was passed along to MAP V, which is a military command in Vietnam. But MAP V elected not to share with us because the information was too sensitive. The source of the information coming from the CIA, they said we can't disseminate this. We were the guys looking for the ships, but they wouldn't tell us what was going on because it was too sensitive for us to know. And then there was a change in command of Vietnam. Westmoreland went out, Abrams came in, Nixon kind of took over the direction, and they started sharing that information with us. And when that came out, the Navy ran some exercises where they had their swift boats go out and try to penetrate us with factor radar. And we found out how the North Vietnamese were penetrating our barrier. So what they did was they elected to fly outside the 120 miles with their radar off, doing visual surface search. Now the bad guys couldn't track us with their ECM capability. And they shifted to daytime patrols only. Because the nighttime patrols, really, we couldn't identify anything at night. We were just flogging our wheels out there. And the way they made us fly, we did a day mission, we got a day and a half off, we did a night mission, we got a day and a half off, and did another night mission. You were always out of your sleep cycle. I mean, fatigue, even with an expanded crew, was a big, big thing to take. I mean, we had one night out there that everybody in the airplane fell asleep at the same time. And I woke up and looked, everybody was sleeping around me, and I said, well, I shouldn't make I don't bother them. So, these penetration exercises showed that they were getting through, and so they moved the operations further east without radar, visual search, and they stopped looking down on the western side of Cambodia and the Gulf of Siam because that was where the Cambodians were, and they started operating out there, and they would find them and they would not identify them, they would not fly by and mark them. They'd mark them and then send the contact information to the mercantile people who come out and intercept the trawler. And as soon as they did this, they picked up 3 infiltrators in the first month. And what these crews on the 125 ships would do, they maintained the cover that they were a maritime weather operation. Kind of like the U-2s flying over Russia. It was meteorological surveillance. And if they were discovered, they raised the China flag on their boat that showed that they weren't from Vietnam, they were from China. But in the summer of '69, the port of Sihanoukville was closed down. Now they had to redouble their efforts of getting supplies into the south. And the second infiltration area started in August of '69, and there were 38 attempts, only 2 were successful. The patrol operations had pretty well nailed down how to catch them. And you can see right here, they flew these tracks that were different than the daisy chains. And they modified it so there was no routine, always being the same to keep the other guys on their toes. During the height of the 72 offensive that the North Vietnamese launched, there were up to 20 patrol airplanes in the sky every day, patrolling everything in the ocean. And what the North Vietnamese did, they actually went over here to the Philippines, went the Philippine coast inside the island chain to avoid detection. That's it. During the height of the 72 offensive, up to 20 sorties a day. By September 72, things had stabilized and they went to 4 flights a day on the South China Sea. Now, when I was flying for VP-45, we had 3 bases. Our primary administrative base was Sangley Point in the Philippines. We flew out of Cam Bay to support operations, but our primary base was Utapao, Thailand. And Utapao, Thailand is where the B-52s flew out of. Sangley Point is located right there in Manila Bay. This is Corregidor Island from World War II, and there's the runway at Sangley Point. When you look down the runway, you can see Corregidor Island off the end of the runway there. One of the things I marveled at is our airplanes were never broke. I mean, if you wrote up that the light bulb in the Doppler nav interface wasn't working, they didn't give you a light bulb. They gave you a whole new Doppler system that worked. And they changed it in like 30 minutes. The supply was unbelievable. Our airplanes were 100% available almost all the time. They could do an engine change in 4 hours. Also, we set a record. No squadron flying Maritime flew with fewer aborts than we did. We flew 360 missions with only 4 aborts, and 2 of those happened the first month. And the CO at an all-officers meeting said, the P-3 flies better on 3 engines than most airplanes fly on 4 engines. Losing an engine is not abort criteria. Even though the manual said if you lose this engine for this thing, you're supposed to go back to your base, he said no, you'll continue on the mission on 3 engines. So the joke became amongst the junior officers, the only acceptable abort criteria with our CO was an uncontained wing fire inboard of the outboard engine. And the one commander who came back with a mechanical generator, which was a return to base item, he was put in hack. Now hack is a Navy term that means I'm punishing you, but it's going to be unofficial. And if you want to make us think about it, then we can make it official and put it in your record. So for 2 weeks he was confined to his room except for flying and eating. Utapao, Thailand, where the B-52s are. You can see inbound to Utapao there after an all-nighter. There's where the B-52s were parked. Our ramp was way, way down here, right by the ocean, and the KC-135 is parked over here. That runway was 11,800 feet long. So what we like to do was, we like to land long so we wouldn't have to taxi so far. And I had a very embarrassing moment in that I landed and didn't know it, so I did a go-around. Very embarrassing. I had to buy lots of drinks at night. And there's our ramp right there. This was our admin headquarters briefing room. Right there was a briefing room where we get our mission details each night. And this is our maintenance department right here. All of these beat up old campers. One was engines, one was airframes, one was electrical, hydraulics. They each had their own trailer with parts in it. We had a bar in our BOQ, that's where our rooms were, and it was a self-serve bar. You can see right there that the drinks were like 10 cents a piece, except Coke, that was 15 cents. And it was open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, self-serve, honor system, worked just fine. Cam Bay was right there in Vietnam, and that was a beautiful, beautiful base. All white sand like Pensacola, beautiful water. I said, someday they're going to build a hotel here. And sure enough, if you look at Google Earth, They got a nice hotel on the beach there now. But again, the house trailer, just like we had over in Utah, there's the beaches right there at the base. And so during our 9-day rotation at Utah, we'd come out of Sandwich Point, we'd fly market time patrol, go to Utah, and then we'd get some rest, and the next day we were alert crew. We'd stay alert for 24 hours. One of our airplanes broke, we'd pick up the mission. Then we went into rest and picked up a night mission. Then after the night mission, we went into rest and came back for a day mission, went back on alert. So we were pretty busy. Time really flew when we were up there because we were in the airplanes flying almost all the time. And right here you can see, this is March of '69. The red boxes are maritime missions. I flew 106 hours as a pilot, plus another 22 as a crew member, 130 hours a month. And in that time, I only got 4 landings, because the missions were so long and we shared the landings that you just didn't get much time flying the airplane. There's an all-nighter coming back in the morning. But the fatigue was always an issue. Other stuff we did, in the Philippines, when we worked in the Utah rotation, we picked up alert. And one of our alert missions was to go up to Yankee Station where the carriers were that were carrying on operations in North Vietnam and Laos, and fly patrols around Yankee Station looking for the possible gunboats that might try to come in and attack the carriers. Another mission we picked up, the Enterprise Battle Group was coming out of Hawaii to go over to Yankee Station, and we were flying out of Guam, giving them an ASW barrier, where we dropped the sonic waves and listened for submarines to make sure there's no submarines around there. And we were about 100 miles in front of the Enterprise, monitoring our barrier of buoys, and we got a call. Enterprise has had a fire, and they're returning to Pearl Harbor. Your mission is over, return to base. And it was a fire right there in the Enterprise that a rocket went off and set off an airplane in fire, which blew up and spread. About 5 years later, I'd be on that ship, and I'd go through that area where the fire had been. It was all brand new then. We went to R&R in Tokyo. There's a picture of me with the Emperor's house in the background. Went to Hiroshima. Got to see the dome there. And then on June 2nd, we departed, going home. We were going to stop in Adak, Alaska, spend the night, get some gas, and be back in San Francisco in the morning. Now, I had 2 June 2nds because we flew across the international date line. Oops, we had a little problem there on takeoff out of Adak, Alaska, when the wing broke off the airplane. And that was the end of that airplane. But I got safely home. There's my wife and my son, who's in the back of the room here, right after he was born. I missed almost the entire pregnancy of my wife. She was 8 months pregnant when I got back, and we had our son and carried on. Market time didn't get much press coverage. Most people have never heard of market time, but the importance of what they did can't be denied. I mean, they P3s could cover a large area, keep track of all the contacts in there. They could monitor these suspicious vessels in international waters, and they operated 24 hours a day for 8.5 years. And they really put the crimp on supplies coming in by the sea. In 1965, 19 or 20 vessels were getting in there. 75% of the resupply in South Vietnam, near the coast, came from the water. By 1967, it's been cut to 10%. Three P-3s were lost with their complete crews, 45 men flying these missions during Vietnam. You'll find their names on the wall in D.C. But the P-3 was an effective operation in market time in Vietnam, and I'm glad I got to do it. Now, if you'd like to visit a P-3, there's one on static display out at Selfridge Air Museum in Mount Clemens, and during the summer from October April through October, that's a new way to spell April there, I see. I just checking you guys still right, check. Okay, from 11 to 5 on the weekends, there'll be people there who will give you tours on the airplane. I'm going to be out there on Saturday the 19th of July. If you come out there, I'll give you a tour of the airplane and tell you all about what we did. Okay, thank you. I'm glad taking any questions or comments.
Hey, Randy?
Yeah.
How were those 3 aircraft lost?
What's that?
How were those 3 aircraft lost?
The one I know of, my next door neighbor going through flight training, flew into Cambodian waters, and they didn't follow the rules of engagement. They did a close flyby on a suspicious vessel, and they opened up with 50 cal tracers and set the airplane on fire, and they crashed in the water, and they were all killed in that one. The same month, his squadron lost another airplane. They have no idea where it was lost. It came out of Utapao, never checked in the first station. So somewhere between Utapao and Cambodia, it disappeared. I think maybe it was shot down also. And the third one was, the P-3 was not equipped with paraflares. Paraflare was an afterthought on the P-3. And so when they gave the P-3 paraflares in 1965, they were launched from inside the airplane through the ejection in the sonobuoy suits. Well, one of the landers caught and set the flare off inside the airplane, and it basically burnt the back of the airplane off, and they went down with that airplane. And after that, they put them on the wing, where if it caught on fire and was stuck in the wing, I could push a button, and the whole station that held everything would eject from the airplane and fall off, so you wouldn't have that fire hazard. Yeah.
What's the common altitude you guys are cruising at?
We flew at about 2,500 feet. That gave us radar coverage about 50 miles, 25 miles either side of the airplane, and we had to stay below 5,000 feet because the airspace above 5,000 feet was ATC controlled, where airplanes were flying on flight plans and stuff like that. Below 5,000, they called it tactical, and we could do anything we wanted down there without talking to anybody. But when we did the flybys in the ships, we normally went down to about 200 feet to get really close to them and get the big ships. Not the suspicious ones, but the SS Tokyo Maru that we had to take pictures of. We get down to 200 feet and do standard rigging passes on those ships. And for a kid with 400 hours of flight time, taking that big airplane down to 200 feet and moving around that ship was a pretty heady experience. Yeah.
So you mentioned at initial training, how many graduated? How many were in the class and how many DOR?
Yeah, that goes to a story. We're sitting there, it's the day before we're commissioned, and our class officer called us in there, and he said, the fun and games are all over now. And I'm thinking, the last 12 weeks of being chased around by these DIs, PTs, etc., was fun and games. He said, the fun and games over now. We're in a war. Most of you in this class are going to go over there and fly in that war. And here's what's going to happen. Look to the man on your left. Look to the man on your right. One of you three, in 5 years, will either be dead, MIA, POW, or a dropout from this program. Well, I looked at the two guys on my left and right and felt really sorry for them because nothing was going to happen to me. I was indestructible at 23. And he was right. About 1/3 of my graduating class dropped out before they got their wings. Some almost as soon as they got their commission, they dropped out of flight training, and they had a 3-year obligation as an ordnance officer in a squadron or something like that. And a lot of guys found out they were not aeronautically adapted. They got sicker than a dog every time they went up. They dropped out of flight training, but like one of the guys I knew, he was a civil engineer. He transferred to the Civil Engineering Corps. He spent 30 years made captain and had a good career. So they dropped out of flight training, but they didn't necessarily drop out of the Navy. Somebody else? Yeah.
did anybody ever get, I mean, any of your planes get shot down? Or anybody ever taken capture? POW?
No, the two airplanes, when they got shot down, they went in the water, and everybody in their planes was lost. And, that's just the way it was. No, other airplanes, we were never shot at, but some of the other crews were shot at by these boats when they got close, and that's why they established the 1,000-yard standoff. Of course, then they also told us, if it's really suspect, get close and get good pictures. We don't have telephoto lens.
Where were the SAM missile sites located?
The SAMs were all up north around Vinh, Hanoi, Haiphong. There were no SAMs down south. If you were low enough, they had the shoulder-fired SA-7s, which are the heat-seeking infantry weapons. We never had to face those because we stayed at about 20 to 25,000 feet till we got over the water. Now, flying over the Ho Chi Minh Trail, incident comes to mind, Christmas Eve. We're flying, it's a peace stand-down during the war. Well, the peace stand-down was a resupply operation for the North Vietnamese, and they told us be alert for extra efforts to try to infiltrate tonight. So we're going across the Ho Chi Minh Trail. We had to fly from Thailand over to Da Nang, and there was A6s and A4s and bombs going off and flares in the skies and bullets coming up off the ground. It was just a real fireworks display there during the peace stand-down. So much for peace on earth, goodwill to men. Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you very much. I enjoyed doing this, and I would, in the bookshop, if you want to get a book and have it signed, I'd be glad to do that for you.
Yeah, cool. Excellent. Thank you so much, Randy. I really appreciate it. Just as a reminder, we're not
That's
meeting.
yours, right?
Yes. We are not meeting next month. We'd be happy to see you at the museum during normal hours, but I will not be here on the first Wednesday evening of next month. So, and the museum will be closed. But Steve Rozek will be here. He'll be talking about baseball Hall of Famers who served. So you can grab one of those flyers if you'd like to. They'll also be available on the website. Typically these go on sale or available for reservations a month prior, but I'll make sure everything's available tomorrow. So we'll have tickets on the website over the next couple of weeks up until that program date. That will be happening on Wednesday, September 3rd. One last thing, please don't forget about the donation boxes that we have. Any contributions will be extremely helpful for us here at the museum, for this program, and for the other programs that we have here at Michigan Flight Museum. I hope you all have a great 4th of July weekend, and we will see you for this program in September. All right, have a good one.
Thanks.